Hi there, my name is Angie McCarty, and I serve as one of the pastors here at Church of the Resurrection.
And I'm Robert Johnson, location pastor here at the Leawood location.
Welcome to Resurrection Stories, a podcast about hope, purpose, transformation, and service. Each week, you'll hear from a guest connected to Church of the Resurrection who is living out their faith in inspiring ways. Our hope is to expose our congregation and the Kansas City area to some of the amazing people who make up our church in a way that inspires you to live out your faith and make a positive impact in our community. As you listen to today's conversation, I invite you to share this podcast with others. You can do that by going to core.org/stories. Now let's welcome our guest for today's episode. Our guest today is Becca Anderson, who serves in our IT department. I can't wait for you to hear her story. She may work in information technology, but she is a pastor at heart. She comes from a long line of servants for God, missionaries and pastors, so she really couldn't get away from pastoring, even in IT. She has an amazing creative side, and her passion is connecting with God's people and sharing their love. So let's get started. Becca, thank you so much for being here with us today. We are so excited to have you here.
It's fun to be here. It's fun to see what you guys do in here.
I know.
It's a delight to have you. And although I've had a chance to get to hang out with you and David, which was so fun, and Linda and I are so grateful that you guys did that with us. I want the folks out here to hear, just kind of learn more about you. So let's start with what you do at Resurrection. How long have you been here? And what do you like most about your job and about Resurrection?
So here at Resurrection, I'm actually in the IT department. And I work on ROC, which is our church management software. And that sounds super exciting and a little bit nerdy. But it's how do we equip people to do what God's calling them to do, and how we can give them tools to help them do what they're doing rather than them working for the tools. So I love doing that.
Yeah.
And you help staff members like me who call and say, Becca, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't understand this. Can you help? And your gentle spirit is so kind and so loving. And I think you have this gift for not making people feel stupid when we feel stupid.
Well, I do have like 20 years experience in ministry, in vocational ministry. So a pastor for 15 years and I've done just about every area of ministry except for men's ministry and finance. I think I've led every other area of ministry. So I have something to relate to with people, and how can I interpret that into IT?
Wow.
I'm so curious already. So take us back and start at the beginning. And how did you get from there to here and ministry in between? Yeah.
So our family business for a few generations back on my side of the family, my dad's side of the family, we're all in ministry. No matter how hard you tried not to. I have one first cousin that's not in vocational ministry, but everybody else, they're all pastors or in ministry of some sort. And all my uncles, my parents are both missionary kids. They met at the school that gave the full ride scholarships to the missionary kids in the denomination, and so they all came out in pairs. So everybody, I know you've never heard that before.
I love it. I love it.
In pairs, but and so everybody, they're all. I have cousins in Texas, and New York, and Germany. I'm like all Alaska, everywhere that are all doing ministry. So as much as we tried not to, it's funny. Like just apparently. That is what we do. We ended up doing that. So growing up in a church family where Grandpa was the associate pastor.
Wow.
That and my Uncle George, who's in the hospital right now. We're praying for. He was the director of the school that started the Christian school at the church we grew up in, and so I couldn't get away with anything. Get caught all the time. Anything you say or do at school. And the cousins all in the same area. We all ended up here in Grandview. And I'd like to say that the pastors and things were the bigger influence in my life, but really a big, huge faith influence in my life was my grandma. Like, people would go to Bible school and know all these things, and they would do Bible studies, and they would have that positional authority and knowledge. But my grandma just was a reflection of Jesus to me.
Wow.
She felt real. She also was snarky. She probably is with Enneagram 8. But she'd talk about the real things. And I just felt like that was more of a reflection of, I want that relationship with God. It wasn't that I saw her praying or doing, the way she loved others, it was a reflection of God's image. And that was a huge impact for me. And, studies show kids that parents and grandparents are much, much higher influence in their faith development of kids than, but I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
And so when I was really young, I think as a child, you just have that natural, you don't over-engineer your relationship with God. You're okay with your emotions and you hear the stories and because of the simplicity of the stories, you're not getting into original languages or anything. You get the meta-narrative a little bit better, I think. The whole big story of it's all about relationship and companionship from the beginning in the garden to like the whole rescue story of Jesus coming to save us, that we can be in relationship. That is just so much easier to grasp as a child. Yeah. So I probably had a really close relationship with God, and it was just a normal part of life because I had it modeled for me.
Right.
So there wasn't like a big moment where I made a change. But then I began to over-engineer like most people do and say, well, I need to memorize this much scripture. I need to do these things and check these boxes. And so my whole faith journey is about changes in prepositions. So prepositions really, really matter. So
say more about that.
Yeah. So my theory on faith development is you go from doing things without God. So without, you do things under God, you do them for God. Like how do you view God? Is this somebody that I'm in fear of to avoid? Do I do this for God because he needs us to do his mission and his work? And I can learn all about God and be a Bible nerd and think all these things, or be like a Bible groupie that I'm just super excited about all the things about God and his church and all the activities and things. But the whole point is about that relationship. And so to be able to go that whole journey of my life, even in ministry, doing things for God or trying to please God, I have this responsibility. I better do it right. I'm going to fumble all over the place. Yeah. But because it's about relationship, you use those shared experiences, your values start to shape. You have shared experiences like having dinner and with people, and you get to grow in your relationship. You get to do those things together, and that's what it's about. It's doing it with God. Not that God needs us to do it for him. He wants to do it with us because he loves loving us. Wow. And he wants to be with us as we do mission together. He could do mission on his own. He could make it happen. He is very powerful. But it's all about restoring that relationship. So in the last 10 years, did I really get the shift from 4, which is really stressful because there's a lot of things and people, and you can mess things up, and that's a lot of responsibility. But to be able to shift to doing it with God, then it's fun. Yeah. And then what I see in my grandma makes sense.
Wow.
Like she just does it with. She doesn't go quote scripture at somebody or whatever, and she has opinions and thoughts on things, and I can do that too, and that's a reflection of God's image. Right. That I see in her, and then I can see God's image reflected in you and other folks. Yeah. That, because I like to spend time with God, and I'm learning more and more and liking the same things, I'm really attracted to the Jesus I see in people, whether they know I have a life with Jesus or not. Yeah. You can just see like, oh wow, that is a reflection of God's image in them. Yeah. That is amazing. That's maybe something I don't have. So. It's been more of a fun thing, and so I can step into roles that I never dreamt, and like the one I'm in now, where I went from pastoring to
tech to IT
to church management, and I was approached to look at that job. I didn't ask. It was 2 interviews before I even applied for the job because I kept saying I'm not qualified for this position. Haven't done IT in years and years and years, and. But just to feel like, no, this is that standing, putting all those things, you want to do this with me. God cares so much about what Resurrection's doing in this community, about building that Christian community, and what can we do with those tools to help see what's working and what's not? How can we make it smoother where people feel connected? It doesn't feel like a big, massive church. It really, how can we use the tools to really make it about relationships and companionship? That's all what it's about. Wow. Is companionship. So I'm passionate about that.
I think it's absolutely amazing that we have a pastor
doing IT.
Doing IT. Yeah.
That just brings a completely different foundation to what you're doing. That it's not data management. It's
care.
People loving and
people
care.
Yeah.
And so I would imagine that everything you do in your life, well, maybe not everything, but the majority of what you do is ministry with people.
Whether it's in IT and my job or just lunch out or wherever, to just look like, well, okay, what's God up to here in the lives of the people I interact with? But a lot with staff, because I think sometimes people forget grace doesn't stop with a paycheck. You know, like when we're here and we're working with God, like that. A lot of people want to try to separate Christian community, but this is the example of we're asking people every day to live in Christian community in their work, and we need to do the same too. Right. And it doesn't mean we have it perfect. Right. The best part is when we don't have it perfect, and the way you have grace for each other and to say, hey, when that happened, that hurt. And I think that maybe you're frustrated. And so this is, how can I help you, like, work through that frustration so that we have a better relationship. And so trying to work through that, and so that we can still live and be that example of Christian community, we have to lead it. We have to lead by example to be able to give it to our other people. So we need to do that with each other on staff, which the staff has been amazing. Love it.
Well, let's talk about the staff, because your husband, David, is also on staff.
Yes.
So tell us what it's like to be on staff with your husband. Like, if you get into an argument before you come to work, do you still ride in the same car together? Like, he's a great guy, but...
You know, and it's so funny. That's part of just knowing that whole... that's helped me see those shared experiences, how you grow closer. So we've worked together on the same church staff for 15 years. Okay. And
both as pastors.
Yes. And at our previous position, we were both executive pastors. So I had the pastoral staff reported up through me, some of the more technical and business related stuff. And he was the backup pastor, reported to him. We kind of had a division of labor and leadership. And leadership development, which is one of the things I love. But working together, like you just don't separate your life. It is a life commitment thing.
Yeah.
But we've been married for 32 years, and we're almost 32 at math. But we've got to experience, even before we were in vocational ministry, like we worked at Hallmark Cards together when we did manual labor. Before you think it's super fancy, we did manual labor, fill the box, tape it shut, push it on the conveyor belt. It supported him while he was in a rock band and paid all those bills so he could travel.
We need to get David on this.
Podcast. Yes, you do. You gotta do some of the hair. You gotta search for the images on the internet of all the hair.
Yeah.
So we both had hair down to here when we got married.
Wow. How long have you all been married?
32 years, yeah.
Wow.
32 years. So this September, I think.
So we've got to have David on and then bring the two of you all back together and do a special session just talking about your marriage and that journey. Yeah.
And just learning. I mean, like, we had talked about 8 and 1, and your husband is 8. You're an 8, and your husband is 1
on the Enneagram.
Well. On the Enneagram, yeah. Just to clarify those, and it's not a whole thing, but there are things when you have personalities that live together that you work through, and again, through all the conflict resolution training and mediation, I went through mediation certification, so being able to help, and also some pastoral counseling, marriage counseling. Yeah. Working through that, you just learn so much about yourself. Yeah. So that always helps your own family as well. Yes. Emotional intelligence, all of those things. So it works pretty well. We don't tend to divide. We like to step into those disagreements a little bit and then just say, okay, well, then I'm going to make these decisions regarding myself and and then you can make it forward. But when we were working on a smaller staff, it was a lot of overlap. It was, the decisions were impacted together. So we don't pick her a whole lot, but I don't know. So.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So one other thing that I know about Becca is that everything she wears that is knitted, she's done that.
Yes,
And
I
as
have
an
a knitting
anti-crafter,
problem. No.
you,
I have a yarn problem.
it's amazing.
What a great problem to have.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
It is relaxing. It is definitely my reminder. I try to actually, and not to over spiritualize things, but I like the tactile thing. And it just, my spiritual director had pointed out that when you take that time to knit, it's my reset. It's a time where I recognize that God is with me. And so from some spiritual practice of just bringing that up. So whenever I am stressed or whatever, what if I just put my hands on and just feel that and remember this is God with me, not just when it's suffering and not just when it's super great, but always with me and recognizing that. And so just to help relax me. So knowing that I have socks on my feet that when I need to, I don't think about it all the time, but sometimes it pops up to mind and it's like, yes, He's with me. And wherever I am is holy ground, and it's God's mission of what He's doing there. So it's just, so cool. It's so fun when those little things pop up.
You should do a workshop to help people find that thing for themselves. Like, what's the thing that makes...
The first and third Saturday of every month at Overland Park, Resurrection Overland Park at 9 to 11, we knit for different charities and organizations, partner schools, and everything we knit is for. And that is how I checked out Resurrection, to know if this was the church for us. Because if you can go to a knitting circle of older ladies and here, like when I'm looking for people like my grandma. Yeah. And people like my grandma were there.
Wow.
Who exhibited God's love in it. And they could say what the vision of the church was.
Wow.
And so that was months before we came on staff here. Wow. And it's been almost a year that I've been on staff. So that's, they were the reason. If it was snarky or not doing well or whatever, you would know. Like, I hear the vision from the staff, but does it trickle through to the knitting circle? And it does. It does.
Yeah. You and Angie mentioned, is this a stat that actually grandparents have more influence on? Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah, I believe it's an 80% more. So talk about the influence of parents on kids, and I can't remember what year the study was, but the number one faith influence is mom. Of asking teens who have considered themselves to have a strong faith. Number one is mom. Number two is dad. I think grandma and grandpa, aunts and uncles, cousins. Pastor, I think, was number 7, and youth pastor was, I think, 16 on the list.
Wow.
So it was much less. Wow. Yes, a youth pastor or youth director is really important because you help you navigate different things.
Right.
But they've been hearing God's voice with different accents from those people who have the biggest influence in their lives, that spend the most time, and that just layers on. And so they already have that faith developed. So whatever faith that parent has does catch and pass on to your kids, and it's kind of their default curriculum, which is so hopeful. That's because beautiful. If you go off and you try to over-engineer for however many years and you deconstruct your faith, you still have that great faith influence of those young years and how important that is.
Your story, you started with grandmother, and Angie asked you to bring us to now, and you said that in the last 4 years I've come into the fullness of who I am, and I'm my grandma. So that's where it started, and that's as I come into what you believe is the maturity of who you are, is that I've become my grandmother. Yeah. That's
not
beautiful.
Perfect, not done, but just joining God and what He's doing, and enjoying that relationship.
A little bit of snark.
Always.
A little bit.
Always.
Becca, thank you so much for being here, for your openness and honesty and sharing the pieces of you that really matter. So grateful.
So fun to be here. You guys are
thanks. Thank you. And thank you for listening to this podcast. We're very excited that you found us. Perhaps you will consider sharing our podcast with friends. You can direct people to core.org/stories. We hope that today has been an inspiration to you as we all try to figure out how to look more like Jesus and His love.